you have Republicans, especially Donald Trump, saying very vile and racist and bigoted things that turns off some people of color. So this switch could even be stronger if you had somebody else on top of the ticket. However, on the Democratic side, voters I talk to, Hispanic voters, Black voters, say, look, they speak to us in a condescending way.
Okay.
So your choices are racism or condescension. So it's a wash.
Could Donald Trump win back the White House thanks to the support of Black and Hispanic voters who traditionally support the Democrats? The shifting sands of US party allegiance are becoming a big talking point in the presidential race. I think this is a fascinating question about race and politics in America. It's true in this country as well. One study has found that both those ethnic groups have swung by around 10% towards Republicans over the last decade or so. I've been speaking to Russell Contreras, justice and race reporter at Axios, which is a US website.
Right here in the United States, Black and Latinos, Americans have always been strong Democratic voters for years, going all the way back to John F. Kennedy when he ran for president in 1960. That's when he captured 90% of the Hispanic vote. Today, that number is down around the 60s. For African Americans or Black Americans, the numbers have been like 90%, but now we're going into the 80s, 80% or so. When Joe Biden ran for president, he won this group of people, these group of voters, with a 50-point lead over Donald Trump. Today, that lead is around 14%. So in order for Joe Biden to win re-election, he needs this strong coalition of Black and Latino voters to come out along with college-educated white voters. That coalition seems to be cracking right now.
And is the argument that older, particularly Black voters, remember the civil rights movement, remember the 50s and 60s in the US, and that means they have an affiliation to the Democrats in a way that maybe if you're 20 or 25 or 30, you maybe don't so much?
That's correct. We're not teaching history as much as we have in the past. And there's been an effort to remove any discussions about racism and slavery in the United States. That may have an effect on some of the young voters. However, a lot of young voters, especially Gen Z voters in the United States, still tend to vote Democratic. However, it's not as strong as the previous generations. They have this affinity to civil rights. They understand what it was to live under segregation. For Latino and Black voters, they're becoming more independent and up for grabs. So that's what's driving the fear among some people in the Biden re-election campaign that, look, we're losing this coalition that we thought would be there and maybe have taken for granted.
Because there may be an argument that in some ethnic communities, conservative values of family and entrepreneurship and things that you traditionally might put closer to the Republican side of the ball than the Democrat, there might be sort of an intuitive connection there that's not that surprising, actually.
No, that's right. And if you think about what's going on in the UK, almost a similar thing. You have, the Tories or the Conservative Party are coming out with economic plans, and you have Labor and Democratic saying, look, we need government interventions and to help facilitate a market economy. But what's happening in the United States is you have Republicans, especially Donald Trump, saying very vile and racist and bigoted things that turns off some people of color. So this switch could even be stronger if you had somebody else on top of the ticket. However, on the Democratic side, voters I talk to, Hispanic voters, Black voters, say, look, they speak to us in a condescending way.
Okay.
So your choices are racism or condescension. So it's a wash.
And actually, is there something good in this? Because that condescension point is a really interesting one. We have people of colour who are very senior in the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister, for example. And there's this slightly prevailing view among liberal circles that how can someone from an ethnic minority background be conservative? And people regard that as patronising and in some way sort of limiting, sort of say, because you come from this background, you've got to have a certain set of political beliefs. That's kind of discriminatory in itself, and I wonder whether people push back against that.
Oh, all the time. I'm in the state of New Mexico, which is the largest, has the largest percentage of Hispanic voters, Hispanic residents in any state in the United States. There are some Mexican American voters who say, look, I have affinity for some of the economic policies of Republicans. I'm a small business owner. I'm looking for tax increases. I'm not so much interested in EVs, especially when there are no EV chargers in this vast rural state. So that doesn't penetrate my imagination. What does is, what are your plans to put more money in my pocket, keep some of my tax dollars in my pocket so that I could grow my business? that is always a division. And if you sit there and say, look, you're being a sellout, or
Yeah.
you're turning against your people, that's a turnoff. And so there are some people of color who say, look, we have a right, you have a right, you have to come at us and talk to us where we are, not talk to us where you think we should be. And that's a difference.
And presumably, this, as you say, that Trump is very much his own character and an extraordinary story that we sort of look on him with something approaching bafflement in this country. But presumably, in 10 years' time, there'll be a different Republican figure. The moderate side of the Republican Party could regain control at some point, and then this could be a genuine shift in American politics, where you have the Democrats have to fight harder for this, and maybe can't rely on ethnic votes in the way that they have done for the last 3 decades.
And that's right. One of the most overlooked stories I think that's coming is there's a big discussion in the United States about migrants coming from the out of the southern border. And yes, we do have an immigration policy that needs to be fixed. However, when you look at the images of people, especially from Central America coming, they're praying before they cross the border. These are evangelical voters. This is probably the base of the Republican Party. It puzzles me that Republicans say we need to keep them out and Democrats are more sympathetic. I always find it should be reversed, that some Democrats is like, hold on, man, we need to vet these people because they're coming in with very conservative views.
Yeah.
And Republicans we should be the ones saying, no, let them in. I think that if they really talk to these migrants and see where they are culturally and politically, you may see a fundamental shift. Right now, that discussion's not happening. It's not happening in the United States, largely because of the language barrier and because of racism. But I do believe, especially those from Central America and other parts of the United States, they're coming with more conservative values than a lot of people think.
Yeah, the racial politics of America will be big in this election year. The election's, of course, the 5th of November. That was Russell Contreras from Axios.